Senator Hanson.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, in the proud tradition of the major political parties of Australia, the Albanese Labor government continues to squib opportunities for significant tax reform. The Stage 3 tax cuts promised to Australians by both major parties have not been delivered. More than 1 million Australians will be worse off. Bracket creep will take an additional $28 billion out of their pockets over the next decade, thanks to Labor's broken promise. We were told dozens of times the full cuts would be delivered while Labor was busy changing them. Labor cannot be trusted. One Nation can be trusted. If we're in a position to do so after the next election, we'll ensure the full tax cuts promised to the Australian people are delivered. That's because One Nation does not support punishing success and aspiration. We don't subscribe to Anthony Albanese's politics of envy, his class warfare, or his tall poppy syndrome. We don't trust Labor with Australians' money. We trust Australians with their own money, and we'd rather more of it was in their hands than those of this reckless Labor government. This is especially the case right now. The Labor's other policies directly driving inflation and the national housing crisis. Labor pretends to deliver cost of living tax cuts with this bill, but their other policies will negate any relief. Labor's record immigration is driving Australians into homelessness, and Labor's pathetic housing policy will do nothing to prevent it. Labor's reckless rush to renewables is driving up the energy bills of Australian households and businesses. Labor's many attacks on our farmers are driving up the cost of our groceries. Labor's attacks on small business and casual employment will drive up costs for consumers and kill jobs. Labor giveth and Labor taketh away. Labor cannot be trusted, but One Nation can be trusted. No one is ever in doubt about what I'm doing because I tell it like it is. Every Australian I talk to is worried about putting food on the table for their families. Every Australian I talk to is increasingly insecure about having a place to live. Every Australian I talk to thinks immigration levels are much too high, and every Australian I talk to says Labor cannot be trusted. The major parties must stop paying lip service to genuine tax reform. They must pull their finger out and actually do something. They could start with getting back to fundamentals. Taxes are required to ensure government can fund the things it must do. Taxes are not meant to be used to redistribute wealth or punish success and aspiration. It's time we look at an overhaul of income tax, and we can start with a flat tax rate. One Nation considers that above a tax-free threshold, there should be a flat income tax rate of 25 cents in place of a progressive taxation and inevitable bracket creep. A person earning $30,000 a year will still pay 10 times less tax than a person earning $300,000. This would mean we are not punishing those who, through hard work and skill, earn more than others. They will still generate revenue, with increased discretionary spending contributing to the GST. They can invest their hard-earned money in Australian property to increase rental supply and relieve Labor's housing crisis. They can invest their hard-earned money in Australian companies and Australian small businesses, creating Australian jobs. For many years, One Nation has also been advocating taxation reform regarding foreign-owned multinational resource companies. Many of them make billions of dollars in healthy profits from exploiting our natural resources. They pay virtually no tax in Australia for this exploitation. The major parties have squandered our natural wealth for decades, making Australia a cheap dirt mine. We could have had a sovereign wealth fund even bigger than Norway's, which is more than $2 trillion. One Nation considers that even minimal reform of taxes like the petroleum resource rent tax could generate $25 to $30 billion in additional revenue. And to actually hear the Greens saying that we actually should wipe the debt from the students is absolutely ridiculous. There's a debt of over $60 billion there. owed from students going to universities. If you say you're not going to tax these students going to universities, and we've got people going to universities now who shouldn't be in universities. They don't have the qualifications. You open it up for anyone to attend, so those hard-working taxpayers out there are going to fund people who don't have to pay a cent towards it. And if you don't pay, you don't contribute, you're not going to put the work and effort into it. It is not up to the taxpayer. We have provided universities for them. But if you are genuine that you want to improve your lot in life, that you want to study and learn, then you must pay your way. As we expect for people to actually fund their own health insurance, which we expect them to do, you have to pay for your education. We have free education right up to Year 12 for students, but it's not a given that you should get free education. Who's going to pay for the $60 billion? Where's it going to come from? I got no problem with TAFE colleges to have that, but we are pushing people through a university program that are being brainwashed into ideology that you have to think their way to go out into the world. And these are a lot of things that we need to address. Taxation is collected by governments. There's only two ways that you can actually fund it. You've got to do it through taxation, or you've got to increase productivity by continually raising taxes. And now you have Minister Plevacek who's talking about putting a tax on clothing. You're only increasing the cost of living to the Australian people because they will pass it on to the consumer. So you can actually see yourselves, raking another $37 billion in taxes that the Australian people can't afford? This is all you do, is more regulation, more control, more taxes to put onto the Australian people who are struggling. You don't get it. You don't understand how people are struggling with the cost of living, because you're only making it worse until you get your productivity up, which I don't see government services are doing. You're not watching where the spending's going. You haven't even had an investigation into the Aboriginal industry, which I've been calling for nearly 30 years, to find out where the money's going. That's what the Australian people want. You wasted $450 million in the Voice. And this money could have gone to give taxation relief. As I said in my speech, if you had a fair taxation policy, that everyone paid the right amount of tax, if we had a 25% taxation right across the board, more people would actually show that they have earned that money. They would have nothing to hide. You wouldn't have businesses paying employees under the counter. They would admit that they've earned that money, but they'd go out there and spend it as well. You'd actually save a lot of people money with accountants and putting in their taxation claims. You'd save a lot of money to the taxation office as well. How much does that cost the taxpayer? There is no clear thinking or vision for this country at all. All you're worried about is where you're going to reap the next round of monies from, where you're going to get it from. We have failing defence forces, we have veterans who have not been looked after properly, we have the farming sector now that you're actually destroying because you have this ideology of going after climate change or net zero, which is a big scam. The amount of money that's costing the taxpayers billions of dollars to fund that, when if you think it's so good, then why don't they stand on their own 2 feet and prove to the Australian people that they can reduce the cost of it instead of going for all these subsidies? What I see in this government is incompetency, that you really have no idea what you're doing. That's why you ram legislation through in this parliament. You don't open up for debate, you won't answer the questions, you can't answer the questions. And it's the worst government that I've actually had to see working in progress while I've been in the parliament, whether from 1996 even to this time that I've been involved in the Senate. Unless you really truly want tax reform, you have to look at your own. Before you go taking these tax cuts off the Australian people, which was promised by the PM that he would not touch these personal tax cuts. He's lied again to the people. He is doing it. And for the fact is that, you're trying to fill up the coffers because the waste of money that you've allowed to happen. And as far as I'm concerned, you look at real tax reform. Incentivise people why they should get that second and third, fourth job. As one man up around Rockhampton said, he's got 5 jobs. How much of that money does he lose because of taxes? Put more money back into the pockets of the Australian people. They will spend it, they will make productivity, they will employ more, and instead of your tax cuts, denying people, what you should be looking at is work with the states to get rid of payroll tax, incentivise companies and businesses to put on more employees instead of forcing them to pay a payroll tax through the states. All the people have seen is lies and more lies all the time. When we got the GST, we were told all these other taxes would go. They never went. They never went. And that's why the people don't trust governments anymore, or trust a lot of the politicians here. The fact is that just come up with something where the both of you should get together, both sides, and to actually come up with something that is you're going to help the Australian people, because they are seriously struggling out there. And these days, when you've got to have both parents have to go out and work to earn the money, possibly even to pay a mortgage or pay a bill, and they're still struggling. And you keep hitting them with higher and higher taxes one way or another. The clothing tax that Plevichess is looking at, it just disgusts me that you can't come up with some decent solutions to actually pay down our debt, to forge ahead in this country, create productivity, or your answer to it is, let's increase the immigration levels. That's all it is. Let's increase the immigration levels to, what was it, nearly 1 million people, or 750,000 students you bring into the country, so it causes a housing crisis. And what you're doing, you can't even look after the pensioners. And that's another suggestion I'll give to you. Allow the pensioners, the aged pensioners, to work unlimited hours. Whatever they work, let them pay the taxes on the money that they've earned, without it affecting what they're entitled to in the pension and with the health care benefits. Get the people, the older generation. You can't get the young ones to work. You're quite happy to pay for the welfare system of over $250 billion a year. Why don't you let the older Australians get up there and work, because a lot of them would dearly love to be able to, without being crucified and having to pay these ridiculous taxes that you always want to take from them. Anyway, as I said, I don't support your bill. I won't be supporting it. I support the fact is giving those tax cuts to the people, but in full, you've lied to the Australian people. It was a promise made. You've taken that promise, but I will fight for the Australian people if we get control of this Senate at the next election to give those full tax cuts to all Australians.
Senator Hanson, thank you. I will just remind you that when you're referring